Right now, if you're in our nation's capital, you're seeing military vehicles patrolling the streets. And National Guard troops from multiple states are on duty. It's a really striking federal intervention.
Yeah, it is. Ordered by President Trump, citing crime concerns, aiming to restore order.
And you've got governors like Mississippi's Tate Reeves, Louisiana's Jeff Landry, quickly sending their state troops in support.
But it's definitely stirring things up. There's significant debate, especially since D.C. officials are pushing back.
Pushing back how?
Well, they're saying their data shows violent crime is actually down. So critics are asking, what's the real purpose here? What's the impact of having such a visible military presence?
Imagine that, stepping out your door in D.C. and seeing federal troops. It raises big questions, doesn't it, about presidential power, federal reach, public safety itself.
Absolutely.
So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack this. The president's authority, a pretty profound authority, to activate military forces right here on American soil.
We'll look at the history, how this power developed.
Yeah, trace it back and examine the National Guard specifically, its unique role. And then we'll get into what's happening right now in Washington, D.C., these tensions between federal and local control.
The goal is really to give you a clear, concise understanding, cut through the noise, find those aha moments without, drowning in information.
Okay, so to really get what's unfolding in D.C., where do we start? The Guard itself.
Exactly. We need to start with a national Guard. What is it? It's a unique part of the U.S. military, mostly part-time reserve units.
Part-time, okay.
And its roots go way, way back. Think 17th century colonial America. Local militias forming to keep the peace in their own communities.
Right, like the original neighborhood watch, but armed. First responders, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
A local force for local needs. And over time, these militias became more formalized.
Through laws.
Yes, key laws, like the 1903 Militia Act, then the 1916 National Defense Act. These really cemented the National Guard as a federal reserve force.
So reserve means they can be called up?
Called up by both state governors for state needs, like disasters, and by the president for domestic issues or even overseas deployments.
And now there's a Guard unit everywhere.
Just about. 54 units in total, one for each state, plus D.C., Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico.
This dual activation idea, state and federal, that seems really critical for understanding the current debate.
It's absolutely crucial.
So let's break that down. State activation first. That's often called state active duty, or SAD.
Correct. SAD. That's when a governor activates their state's guard under state law. Think natural disasters, civil unrest maybe.
And the key point?
The key point under SAD is the command structure. They report to the governor. And critically, they are not usually restricted by the Posse Comitatus Act regarding law enforcement.
Meaning they can act as police, essentially.
In that state active duty status, yes, they often can perform law enforcement functions.
Okay, then there's federal activation.
Right. The president can federalize the Guard, usually under Title 10 of the U.S. Code. Think big emergencies, upholding federal law, maybe an insurrection.
So Title 10 pulls them into the regular armed forces structure.
Effectively, yes. They become part of the federal military chain of command, reporting to the president. And here's a fascinating bit. The president can sometimes do this, even if a governor objects.
Really? Even without the governor's consent?
In certain emergency situations, particularly defined under laws like the Insurrection Act, yes. Federal authority can override state objections.
But D.C. is different. You mentioned that. How does D.C.'s Guard control work?
Yes. D.C. is unique. There's no governor acting as that intermediary.
So who's in charge?
The president. The president of the United States is the direct commander-in-chief of the D.C. National Guard.
Wow. So direct federal control, no state buffer.
Exactly. It gives the federal government, the president, immediate authority over those troops in the capital. That's a huge distinction compared to the states.
Okay, so this power, deploying troops domestically, it's not new. You said it has deep roots.
Very deep. It goes right back to the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the power to, and I'm quoting loosely here, call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions.
The militia, that's the precursor to the Guard.
That's right. And the early militia acts back in 1792 gave the president the authority to actually do that, to federalize state militias, to stop uprisings or enforce federal law.
And who was the first to use it?
George Washington himself. During the Whiskey Rebellion in the 1790s, he federalized militias from Pennsylvania and nearby states to put down that tax revolt.
So right from the beginning, setting a precedent.
A major precedent for presidential power in maintaining domestic order.
And looking through history, this power wasn't just sitting on a shelf. It's been used quite a bit, often at really defining moments.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the start of the Civil War, 1861. Abraham Lincoln federalized 75,000 Union state militia members.
75,000, that's huge.
It was a massive mobilization, a powerful assertion of federal authority to preserve the Union itself.
Then fast forward maybe mid-20th century, the Civil Rights Movement.
Exactly. Some of the most potent examples come from that era. Little Rock, Arkansas, 1957, President Eisenhower.
The Little Rock Nine.
Yes. He deployed 1,200 Army troops and federalized 10,000 Arkansas National Guardsmen. Think about that. He federalized the state's own guard to override the governor, Orville Faubus.
Who was using the Guard to block integration?
Precisely. So Eisenhower used federal power, including the Guard, to escort those brave students into Central High School, a landmark moment for federal supremacy and civil rights.
And that wasn't a one-off, was it? Didn't Kennedy and Johnson do similar things?
They did. President Kennedy activated the Mississippi National Guard in '62, the Alabama Guard in '63, again, to enforce university integration against the explicit wishes of state governors.
Using the military to ensure civil rights were upheld.
Yes. And then President Johnson, LBJ, in 1965, during the Selma to Montgomery March, after Bloody Sunday, that horrific violence by state troopers.
He stepped in.
He federalized Alabama's National Guard and sent U.S. Army troops specifically to protect the marchers. Again, overriding Governor George Wallace, ensuring citizens could exercise their rights safely.
It wasn't always about civil rights enforcement, though. Sometimes it was about, well, large-scale unrest, right? Like Detroit.
Right. The Detroit Uprising in 1967, that was huge. 4 days of intense rioting, looting, arson. President Johnson federalized 8,000 Michigan National Guard troops.
And a regular army, too.
And authorized another 5,000 federal troops on top of that. Johnson made it clear. He said, pillage, looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights. They are criminal conduct, showing the power used to restore public order.
Then just a year later, 1968, after Dr. King's assassination, widespread riots again.
Terrible time. Johnson activated 1,750 Guard members in D.C. alone and another 12,000 federal troops across more than 100 cities.
And wasn't there a case where the Guards stayed for a really long time?
Wilmington, Delaware. That's a stark example. The Guard patrol lasted 9 months.
9 months. Why so long?
Because the governor, Charles Terry, refused to withdraw them. It became the longest military occupation of an American city. Shows the potential for prolonged federal presence.
It's not always about conflict, though. What about humanitarian situations?
Good point. The Guard plays a huge role there, too. Think of the Cuban refugee crisis in 1980, the Mariel boat lift.
When thousands fled Cuba for Florida.
Over 125,000 people. President Jimmy Carter activated over 1,700 members of the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve. Similar reserve force concept to help manage that massive influx. Humanitarian aid, logistics, security. It shows the Guard's adaptability.
And maybe one more recent example people might remember, Los Angeles.
The 1992 L.A. riots after the Rodney King verdict. President George H.W. Bush invoked the Insurrection Act.
So he formally used that specific law.
Yes. He federalized nearly 6,000 California National Guard troops, sent FBI SWAT, federal riot police, and about 4,500 soldiers. The scale of the violence, over 60 deaths, $1 billion in damage, prompted a massive federal response when local authorities were overwhelmed.
So across history, from rebellions to civil rights, riots, even refugee crises, this presidential authority has been a consistent, powerful tool.
Definitely. Not some dusty, unused power, but a well-established aspect of presidential action.
Which brings us right back to today, Washington, D.C., August 2025. President Trump declares this public safety emergency
And orders a federal operation.
using about 800 D.C. National Guard members, the ones he directly controls, as we discussed.
Correct.
Plus, backup from 6 states, West Virginia, Mississippi, Tennessee, Louisiana, South Carolina, Ohio, sending hundreds of their Guard troops.
Adding hundreds more boots on the ground.
So the administration's reason, what are they saying?
Their stated goals are quite direct. Restore law and order and restore the Capitol's beauty. President Trump himself has been very vocal.
Saying D.C. was unsafe?
He claimed D.C. was, and I quote, the most unsafe city in the United States and perhaps the world until recently. And he called D.C.'s own crime stats fake and a total fraud.
Strong words. And the governor sending troops.
They're echoing that message. Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves said, Crime is out of control there. Americans deserve a safe capital city.
Yeah.
Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry spoke about law and order, the capital reflecting the nation needing to return safety and sanity.
Okay, that's the official rationale. But you mentioned controversy earlier.
Right. There's significant pushback. D.C. officials, Mayor Muriel Bowser included, paint a very different picture.
Based on their data.
Based on D.C. police data. They say violent crime was actually at a 30-year low when Trump took office again in January and, get this, has fallen another 26% since then.
So a direct contradiction on the crime stats.
A fundamental disagreement about the facts on the ground, which fuels the criticism.
And what are the critics calling this deployment?
Terms like unprecedented federal intervention, political policing mission. They argue it violates D.C.'s home rule, its limited self-governance.
Have there been protests?
Yes, public protests have happened, people with signs saying no military occupation, things like that. It taps into that long-standing debate about D.C.'s status and federal control.
Are other groups concerned? You mentioned veterans groups.
Yeah, groups like the Chamberlain Network, they're criticizing pulling Guard members away from their primary mission, especially disaster response.
Like during hurricane season.
Exactly. Pointing out that Louisiana and Mississippi, states prone to hurricanes, sent troops to D.C. during peak season. Raises questions about priorities, federal mission versus state needs.
And this ties into a bigger debate, too, doesn't it? About how best to achieve safety, militarization versus other approaches.
Absolutely. It sparks that conversation.
Yeah.
Violence prevention advocates argue that, police presence is about response, reacting to crime after it happens.
But not prevention.
But not necessarily creating safety proactively. They point to recent administration cuts nearly $170 million in grants to gun violence prevention groups, suggesting a disconnect between the goal of safety and the methods being funded or prioritized.
It's a fundamental difference in philosophy, it seems.
It really is. How do you build safe communities? More boots on the ground or more investment in community programs and prevention?
One really important legal point, though. What can these federalized troops actually do? Are they acting as police?
That's where the Posse Comitatus Act comes back in. Remember, we mentioned it earlier.
Right, the law limiting military involvement in civilian law enforcement.
Exactly. When the Guard is federalized under Title 10, like these troops are, PCA generally applies. It largely prohibits them from direct law enforcement jobs.
Such as?
Search, seizure, making arrests. They generally can't do those things.
So what are their roles then, typically?
Often, it's about maintaining a visible presence, a deterrent effect, providing support, administrative, logistical, maybe doing that area beautification work mentioned.
So they might have weapons available, but aren't usually walking around making arrests.
Typically not carrying weapons during these duties, and direct arrests are generally off limits for federalized troops acting under PCA. It's meant to keep that clear line between military and civilian policing.
Okay, so let's try to pull these threads together. We've seen this presidential authority to deploy troops domestically as, well, significant.
Deeply rooted in the Constitution, used throughout history for all sorts of reasons, suppressing rebellions, enforcing laws, civil rights, managing unrest, even humanitarian aid.
And the National Guard sits in this unique spot, this balance sometimes uneasy between state and federal control.
With D.C. being the standout case of direct federal command.
Right. And these deployments, as we see now, they often become flashpoints. They ignite legal challenges, political debates.
And really highlight those ongoing tensions in American governance. Federal power versus local autonomy. The current D.C. situation is just a really vivid, real-time example of all that. Different views on safety, on federal intervention, on what order even means.
It's a complex picture, definitely. Constitutional power, history, local politics, differing ideas about safety, all colliding right now in the Capitol.
It really is.
So, as we watch this unfold, and as these lines between federal oversight and local control seem to keep blurring, particularly around public safety, that leaves us with a question, doesn't it, for you listening? How do we as citizens ensure that this kind of power is used responsibly, effectively, and ultimately what truly makes our community safe?